It was 5:14 in the morning when I woke up. That's how it is when you get old. Sleep is like something stolen from you that you can never get back. Today is my 74th birthday. I got out of bed as quietly as I could, afraid of waking someone, even though I'm the only person in this house. My husband, Walter, has been gone for 20 years, and my son, Kevin, got married and moved out a decade ago. This old 800-square-foot house is so quiet, you can hear the dust settle. In the kitchen, I made myself a simple bowl of soup for my birthday. As the water boiled, my heart rose and fell with the bubbles. I remember when Kevin was little, every year on my birthday, he'd use his allowance to buy me a small cake. He'd stick crooked candles in it and sing happy birthday in his tiny voice. Life was so hard back then. His father had just passed away, and the survivors' benefits from the mill were pitifully small. I worked 2 jobs to raise him. But whenever I saw his smiling face, none of the hardships seemed to matter. Once the soup was ready, I carried the bowl into the living room and stopped in front of the old wooden dresser. In the top drawer was an old photo album. I wiped my hands and carefully took it out. The plastic film over the photos had yellowed, but the pictures inside were still clear. There was Kevin at his elementary school graduation, standing next to me in an ill-fitting suit, grinning from ear to ear. In middle school, he won 3rd place in a math competition and shyly held up the certificate for me to take a picture. On the day of his high school graduation, he was a head taller than me, but still wrapped his arm around my shoulders like a little boy. I gently caressed the photos, my fingertips leaving faint smudges on the glass frames. We were so happy then. He said he would get into a good college, find a good job, and give me a good life. He did it too. He got into a top state university, landed a job at a multinational corporation, and married a girl from the city. It's just that his idea of a good life was different from mine. My phone suddenly buzzed, interrupting my thoughts. It was a text from the local clinic, reminding me to pick up my test results next week. I glanced at the old grandfather clock on the wall. It was already 9:30. Kevin had said he would bring his wife and son over to celebrate my birthday today. Why hadn't I heard anything? I picked up my phone, hesitated for a moment, and then dialed my son's number. It rang 7 or 8 times. Just as I thought no one would answer, the call connected. Hello? It was my daughter-in-law, Jessica's, voice. The background was noisy, like she was somewhere crowded. Jessica, it's me, I said, trying to make my voice sound cheerful. Is Kevin there? Oh, Mom. Her tone immediately cooled. Kevin's busy. What's up? My heart sank a little. It's nothing important. I was just wondering if you guys were still coming over today. Today? She paused for 2 seconds, and I could almost picture her rolling her eyes. Oh, geez, I don't think we can make it today. We have something really important going on over here. It's Jessica's dad's birthday, and the whole family is at a restaurant. I was stunned. Jessica's dad? My husband had been dead for 20 years. Then it hit me she was talking about her own father. Oh, I see, I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling. Well, you guys have fun. Maybe another time. Mom, look, I don't mean to be rude, Jessica cut in. But you're a grown woman. You can't be so dramatic about birthdays. You're not a kid anymore. Anyway, Kevin's calling me. I gotta go, bye. The line went dead, leaving me standing there, holding the phone. The sun was shining brightly outside, illuminating the new floral curtains I had bought just for today. I slowly put the phone down and walked to the kitchen. I looked at the food I had prepared. The beef stew, Kevin's favorite, the mac and cheese for my grandson, Leo. I even made the kale salad that Jessica likes. Now, all the food was cold, just like a certain part of my heart. For lunch, I ate some leftovers and put all the dishes I'd prepared into the refrigerator, one by one. In the afternoon, I sat on the balcony and knitted. It was a sweater for Leo. The last time he was here, he said he wanted a hand-knitted sweater like one of his classmates had. I was knitting it carefully, with tight, neat stitches. I was worried it wouldn't be fashionable enough, so I even went online to look up patterns that young people like these days. At 7 in the evening, my phone buzzed. It was a social media friend request from an unknown account. I opened it. The profile picture was a cartoon character, and the name was Leo's mom. I knew it was another one of Jessica's accounts. After I accepted the request, she immediately sent a video. I pressed play. It was a luxurious private dining room in a restaurant. A large happy birthday banner hung on the wall, and beneath it was a huge framed photo of Jessica's father in a sharp new suit, his face flushed and beaming. The camera panned across the dining table, which was laden with lobster, crab legs, and all sorts of expensive seafood. Finally, the camera settled on a family portrait. Jessica's parents were seated in the middle, with Kevin and Jessica standing behind them. My grandson, Leo, was in the front, holding up a peace sign. Everyone was wearing new clothes and smiling so happily. Beneath the video, Jessica sent a message. "See what a real family party looks like." I didn't reply. I put the phone down and went to get a drink of water. My hand was shaking so badly that I spilled half of it on my pajamas. At 10:30 that night, I was already in bed when my phone rang again. This time, it was a call from Jessica. "Mom, are you asleep?" Her voice was slurred with alcohol. In the background, I could hear Kevin clinking glasses with someone. I was about to. "What is it?" I asked calmly. "Oh, nothing. I just suddenly remembered. Today's your birthday too, right?" She giggled. "So sorry, we totally forgot. But you're not really part of our family, so it's normal to forget, right?" A burst of laughter erupted in the background. I clearly heard Kevin's voice. "Honey, who are you talking to? Come on, Dad's about to cut the cake." "Did you hear that?" Jessica said triumphantly. "We're cutting the cake now." A huge, 3-tiered cake, special ordered from a fancy French bakery. "Too bad you can't have any." I closed my eyes and took a deep breath. "Well, you all have a good time." "Ugh, you're no fun," she said, sounding annoyed by my reaction. "Always playing the victim. Whatever, I'm not talking to you anymore. We have to take pictures." The call ended. I sat there in the darkness, completely still. Moonlight slipped through a crack in the curtains, drawing a pale line on the floor. I slowly got up, went to the study, and turned on the desk lamp. From the back of a drawer, I took out a notebook. I opened it to the first page and wrote down today's date. Then, I wrote for a long time, recording everything. How Kevin came home less and less after he went to college. How he almost never called me on his own after he started working. How, at his wedding, Jessica wouldn't let me give a speech. How, when Leo was born, they put me in the farthest corner of the hospital room. One thing after another, like counting the wounds on my own body. When I wrote the last word, I closed the notebook and looked at the clock on the wall. It was 1:20 in the morning. At that moment, I made a decision. If you say I'm not family, then there are some things you don't deserve to have. When the early morning sun filtered through the sheer curtains, I had already been sitting at my desk for 2 hours. The notebook lay open in front of me, its pages filled with my dense handwriting. I rubbed my sore eyes, closed the book, and put it back in the deepest part of the drawer. In the kitchen, I made myself a strong cup of tea. The leaves unfurled in the boiling water, like memories slowly waking up. I took the mug out to the balcony and watched the elderly people doing their morning exercises below. Mrs. Martinez from the next building was doing Tai Chi with her daughter, who carefully matched every move to her mother's rhythm. I took a sip of tea, the bitter taste spreading across my tongue. Mrs. Martinez's husband passed away even earlier than my Walter, but her daughter gave up a high-paying job in another state to come back and be with her mother. Every time I ran into her at the market, Mrs. Martinez would complain that her daughter wasn't ambitious, but the smile lines around her eyes couldn't hide her pride. The mug suddenly felt too hot. I set it down and went back inside. The old phone book was lying on the coffee table. I flipped to the K's, and my finger stopped on a name, Catherine Wallace. We used to be colleagues at the mill and took night classes together. Later, she passed the bar and now works at a law firm in the city. Come to think of it, we hadn't spoken in nearly 10 years. The phone rang for a long time before it was picked up. "Hello, Wallace and Associates." It was a young woman's voice. "I'd like to speak with Catherine Wallace. Please tell her Eleanor is calling. One moment, please." While I waited, I walked over to the full-length mirror and smoothed my hair. The woman in the mirror had graying hair and drooping eyes, but there was a sharp glint in them that didn't belong to someone in their 70s. "Eleanor? Is that really you?" Catherine's voice was raspier than I remembered, but her brisk, no-nonsense tone hadn't changed a bit. "It's me, old friend." My own voice sounded deliberately light. "It's been a long time. Must be 10 years. How have you been? Are you doing okay?" Her concern sounded genuine. We chatted for a few minutes before I got to the point. "Catherine, I have a legal matter I'd like to discuss with you. Would you have time to meet?" There was a short pause on the other end. "I have an opening this afternoon at 3. Can you come to the office? I'll text you the address." After hanging up, I started gathering the documents I needed. The deed to the house, bank statements, insurance policies. I placed them one by one into an old leather bag. My hand paused as I held the bank statement. The number on it was quite a bit larger than I remembered. I had hardly spent any money over the years. My pension and the rent from the spare room just kept accumulating, always thinking that one day it would be for my grandson. At 2:30 in the afternoon, I changed into a navy blue dress. It was my nicest piece of clothing, one I only wore for holidays. Standing in front of the mirror, I hesitated for a moment, then took out the pearl necklace from my drawer and put it on. It was the last birthday gift Walter had given me. He had said that when I turned 70, he would buy me an even better one. It's a shame he never made it to that day. Wallace & Associates was located in a sleek, high-rise downtown. As the elevator ascended, my ears popped from the change in pressure, just like my anxious heart at that moment. "Eleanor." Catherine walked quickly toward me from down the hall. She had put on some weight, had a stylish short haircut, and a tailored suit that radiated professional confidence. We shared a brief hug. She wore a light perfume that smelled expensive. Her office was spacious and bright, with floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a panoramic view of the city. A cup of hot tea was placed in front of me. Catherine sat across from me, her hands clasped on the desk. "So," she said, "what's the trouble?" I took a sip of tea, choosing my words carefully. "I want to get my will in order." Her eyebrows raised slightly. "It's perfectly normal to be thinking about that at this age. Are there any special requests?" "My assets are simple, just the house I live in and some savings," I said slowly. "I want to know, if I don't want to leave my property to my legal heir, what are my options?" Catherine's eyes narrowed. She put down her pen. "You're having problems with your son." I gave a bitter smile, but didn't answer directly. "I just want to understand the legal possibilities. According to inheritance law, you can freely dispose of your personal property through a will," she said, her tone becoming professional and calm. "However, your legal heir, your son, can contest it in court if he believes the will infringes on his rightful share." "What is a rightful share?" "Generally, no less than 2/3 of what he would inherit by law." She paused. "Eleanor, what happened between you and your son?" The sunlight outside suddenly seemed blinding. I blinked my sore eyes. "He forgot my birthday but threw a huge party for his father-in-law. My daughter-in-law called to tell me I'm not part of their family." Catherine's expression softened. "Kids can be thoughtless sometimes." "It's not thoughtlessness," I interrupted. "It's a complete lack of caring. Catherine, do you have any idea how hard it was for me to raise Kevin on my own? He was only 8 when his father died. The survivor's benefits from the mill were barely enough. I worked at the mill during the day, took night classes, and washed other people's clothes on weekends, just so he could eat well, dress well, and go to a good school." My voice began to tremble. I quickly took a sip of tea to steady myself. "The year he went to college, I sold my wedding ring to pay his tuition. Now he makes 6 figures a year, but he can't even remember my birthday." Catherine was silent for a long time. Finally, she sighed. "If you've really decided not to leave him your assets, you could consider donating them to a charity. Or you could set up a family trust with specific conditions he has to meet to receive the funds. Is there any way to make sure he gets absolutely nothing?" "There is," she said, looking at me meaningfully, "but it requires some special arrangements. Are you sure you want to go down that road?" I didn't answer immediately. Instead, I took the house deed out of my bag and pushed it across the table to her. "How much is this house worth right now?" She gave it a rough estimate. "An 800-square-foot house in a great school district in this older part of town. At least 300,000. And your savings? Around $120,000. Catherine let out a low whistle. Well, look at you, a secret millionaire. She paused. Are you really willing to not leave a single penny of that to your son? Willing? I laughed, a sound sharper than I intended. I was willing to give him my life, but he's not willing to give me a shred of his attention. Our conversation lasted until early evening. Catherine gave me several options and advised me to go home and think them over carefully. As I was leaving, she suddenly asked, Eleanor, you're not planning on doing anything foolish, are you? I patted her hand. Don't worry, I haven't seen how this ends yet. It was already dark when I got home. I didn't turn on the lights, using the glow from the streetlights outside to start tidying up the house. Starting in the bedroom, I pulled out every drawer, carefully examining the contents. Most of it was just odds and ends. Faded old photographs, expired medication, half-used notebooks. In the bottom drawer of the wardrobe, I found an old tin box with a Hershey's logo on it. I stared at it for a moment. This was Kevin's treasure box from when he was a boy. He always used to hide his favorite little trinkets inside. I sat on the floor and opened the box with trembling hands. Inside were a few glass marbles, a rusty spinning top, some old postage stamps, and at the very bottom, a piece of paper folded into a small square. I carefully unfolded it. The paper had yellowed, and the pencil writing was faint, but I could still make it out. I promised to be a good son when I grow up and take care of Mom. I will buy her a big house and take her on trips so she never has to suffer again. If I am not a good son, let me turn into a little dog. Kevin, May 10th, 1990. It was from a Mother's Day assignment his third-grade teacher had given. I remember that day. He came running home, all excited, and mysteriously stuffed the paper into my hand, insisting that I read it out loud in front of him. After I finished reading, he threw his arms around me and said, Mom, I promise I'll do it. Tears welled up unexpectedly, falling onto the paper and blurring the childish handwriting. I frantically tried to wipe them away with my sleeve, but it only smeared the words more. Just like our relationship, the more I tried to fix it, the more broken it became. I carefully folded the paper, put it back in the box, and continued cleaning. The books in the study, the dishes in the kitchen, the toiletries in the bathroom. I made a list, noting where each item would go, some to be donated, some to be kept, some to be taken with me. At 1 a.m, I collapsed onto the bed, exhausted but unable to sleep. The sound of a car passing by occasionally broke the silence, like time itself driving away. I remembered when Kevin had a high fever in middle school, and I carried him on my back for 2 miles to the hospital. I remembered waking up at 4 every morning to make him soup before his college entrance exams. I remembered his wedding day, sitting in the very last row, watching him kiss his bride under the spotlight. No one introduced the quietly weeping old woman as the groom's mother. My phone vibrated suddenly. It was a text from the local community center, reminding me that a staff member would be visiting tomorrow morning for a senior wellness check. I replied, received, then turned off the phone and lay in the darkness with my eyes open until dawn. When the community center worker arrived, I was on the balcony watering my pothos plants. The doorbell rang 3 times before I heard it, and I nearly tripped over my slippers rushing to open the door. Hi, Mrs. Eleanor? I'm Chloe from the Community Service Center. A young woman in her 20s stood at the door, her hair in a ponytail, carrying a backpack. Her smile was as bright as the Sunday. Sorry to bother you. I'm just here for a routine visit. I let her in and poured her a cup of tea. Chloe took a tablet and some forms out of her bag and began asking about my living situation while taking notes. The questions were standard: health condition, daily activities, any difficulties. Mrs. Eleanor, does your son visit you often? She asked suddenly. My fingers paused on my teacup. He's busy with work. He doesn't come back often. But with technology being so convenient now, you must talk on the phone every day, at least, Chloe said, her eyes bright with the righteousness of youth. We talk once a week, I lied. She seemed to sense something but didn't press the issue, instead asking about my health. I told her that apart from some joint pain, I was in good health. That's great, she said with a smile. Our community's senior center has just opened new classes. We have calligraphy, painting, and even a choir. Are you interested? I was about to refuse, but then something occurred to me. Do you have any legal lectures? We do. Once a month. The next one is, she checked her notes, next Wednesday at 2 in the afternoon. It's about protecting the rights of senior citizens. I'll think about it, I said. Before leaving, Chloe gave me a business card. My number is on here. It's on 24 hours a day. Call me anytime if you need anything. After closing the door, I leaned against it and let out a long sigh. That girl was too sharp. I almost let my guard down. I went back to the study to continue my massive decluttering project. At 3 in the afternoon, I called a real estate agent's office. The agent who answered was a young man with a booming voice. When he heard I wanted to get my house appraised, he was incredibly enthusiastic and scheduled a visit for the next morning. After hanging up, I stood in the middle of the living room, looking around. This house was part of the subsidized housing from the old mill. After Walter passed, the company took care of us and gave us this unit, the one in the best location. 2 bedrooms, 1 living room, with windows facing north and south. It was old, but it got great light. Kevin grew up here, from elementary school through high school. The walls used to be covered with his awards. After he went to college, I couldn't bring myself to tear them down, not until the wallpaper turned yellow and started to peel. The next day, the agent, Mike, arrived right on time. He was dressed in a crisp suit, holding a laser measure and various other tools, sniffing around the house like an energetic hound. "Ma'am, you've kept this place in great shape," he said admiringly. "It's an older building, but you can't beat the location. The top elementary school is right across the street. Parents are fighting to get into this school district." I followed him from room to room, listening to his non-stop analysis of the market. Finally, he gave me a number. Around $350,000. "If you're looking for a quick sale, $320,000 should move it fast," he added. I told him I needed to think about it. He left his card and went on his way. As soon as the door closed, I called Catherine and asked her to come over that evening to talk things over. At 7 that night, Catherine arrived with a bag of fruit. We had a simple dinner, then sat in the living room to discuss business. "You've really decided to sell the house?" she asked seriously. I nodded. "The sooner, the better. Then where will you live?" "I've looked into it. There's a nice assisted living facility out in the suburbs. It's $5,000 a month, and the environment is very nice," I said calmly. "Besides, this house is too big for me anyway." Catherine sighed. "Eleanor, tell me honestly, what are you planning?" I stood up, went to the study, and brought back the old tin box. I handed her the yellowed promise note. After reading it, she looked at me with a complicated expression. "I want to test him," I said. "If I were really in trouble, what would he do?" "How do you plan to test him?" "Tomorrow, I'm going to pretend I've fallen and hurt myself, and then I'll call him." My voice was unnaturally calm. "We'll see how he reacts." Catherine took my hand. "Don't be too hard on yourself." "There's nothing left that can hurt me more," I said with a bitter smile. The next morning at 10 o'clock, I put my plan into action. First, I moved the coffee table aside and placed a soft cushion on the floor. Then, I slowly lay down. Taking a deep breath, I dialed my son's number. "Mom?" He sounded surprised. The background was noisy, like he was at the office. "Kevin." I made my voice sound weak. I fell. It hurts so much. I don't think I can get up." "What? What happened?" he said, his voice rising. "Where did you fall? Is it serious?" "The living room." I was trying to get some water. "To my leg. It really hurts." "Stay there. I'm on my way." He hung up. I lay on the cushion, staring at a crack in the ceiling. The crack looked like an upside-down tree, its branches spreading out in all directions. 20 minutes later, I heard a key in the lock. Thank goodness I hadn't changed it yet. "Mom?" Kevin rushed in, his suit impeccable but his tie crooked. When he saw me on the floor, he hurried over and knelt down. "How are you? Can you move?" "Help me up," I said, holding out my hand. He helped me to the sofa, his expression concerned but his eyes darting around. "Should we go to the hospital?" "Let me just rest for a minute," I said, rubbing my knee. "I think I just twisted it." How could you be so careless? He pulled out his phone and checked the time. I have a really important meeting this afternoon. My heart sank. You go on to work. I'll be fine. Are you sure you don't need to go to the hospital? He asked again, visibly relieved. I'm sure. You go. He stood up and straightened his tie. Okay, I'm heading out then. Call me if you need anything. He walked to the door, then turned back. Oh, by the way, Jessica said she'd bring Leo to see you this weekend. The door closed. I sat on the sofa, motionless. The result of this test was even crueler than I had imagined. He couldn't even wait for me to pretend to feel better before he rushed to leave. I slowly walked back to the bedroom, took out my notebook, and recorded the day's results. That weekend, Jessica did indeed bring my grandson. To my surprise, Kevin came along too. They brought a bag of fruit. As soon as Leo walked in, he started whining for an iPad. Grandma's house doesn't have an iPad, I said. This place sucks. It doesn't even have an iPad. The 10-year-old boy pouted, his face full of disdain. Jessica laughed awkwardly. Mom, he's just a kid, don't mind him. I poured them tea and asked Kevin about work. He answered distractedly, his eyes glued to his phone. Jessica, meanwhile, was looking all around the room, her gaze sweeping over the furniture and appliances as if she were appraising their value. Mom, this house must be worth a lot of money now, right? She finally got to the point. I'm not sure. It's an old house, I said dismissively, but it's right across from that top elementary school. A house in this school district is a hot commodity, she said, her eyes lighting up. Kevin and I are thinking about getting a bigger place. If we sold your house, with our savings, we could afford a house in the suburbs. Her voice was filled with excitement. And then we could have you come live with us. I glanced at Kevin. He was still staring at his phone, tacitly approving his wife's proposal. The assisted living facility is very nice. There are people to take care of you, and other people my age, I said. Oh, but that would sound so bad. Like we're not good children, Jessica said with a fake smile. Besides, it's not safe for you to live alone at your age. You fell today. What if tomorrow? Is that why you came today? To talk about this? I cut her off. The room fell silent. Leo was jumping on the sofa, throwing the cushions everywhere. Jessica feebly scolded him, then turned back to me. Mom, just think about it. We'll find the best facility for you, and the money from selling the house. I'll think about it, I said, standing up. The conversation was over. As they were leaving, Leo didn't even say goodbye. He just ran for the elevator. Kevin lingered at the door for a moment. Mom, don't overthink it. We're just trying to do what's best for you. I know, I said calmly. Drive safe. The moment the door closed, I called Catherine. Find me a buyer. The faster, the better. The next day, I went to the public library and looked up information on various charities. On my way home, I passed a construction site. On the fence was a poster for a school fundraising initiative, the Green Mountain Elementary School project. There was a contact number on it. I wrote it down. That evening, I dialed the number. A man with a gentle, middle-aged voice answered. He introduced himself as Mr. Evans, the principal of the Green Mountain Project. I told him I wanted to donate money for the school's construction. He was so excited he could barely speak, insisting on visiting me in person to thank me. 3 days later, Principal Evans came to my house. He was a tall, thin man in his 50s, with tanned skin and rough hands, clearly someone who spent a lot of time in rural areas. I made him tea. He sat awkwardly on the edge of the sofa, holding the teacup without taking a sip. Ma'am, you might not understand our school's situation, he said earnestly. We're in one of the most remote mountain areas. Half of our 200 students are children left behind by parents who work in the cities. The school building is 30 years old. The roof leaks when it rains, and it's drafty in the winter. How much do you need to build a new school? I asked directly. He was taken aback. A preliminary estimate is around $200,000. But you don't have to. I'll donate $300,000, I said. $200,000 for the new building, and the remaining $100,000 to set up a scholarship fund. Principal Evans's hand trembled, and tea sloshed onto his pants, but he didn't seem to notice. Ma'am, this is too generous. Wouldn't you like to visit the school first? I will, I said. But not right now. After he left, I stood on the balcony watching the sunset. The sky was painted orange-red, the clouds like burning flames. I remembered when Kevin was little, we used to watch the sunset together like this. He would point at the sky and say, "Mom, when I grow up, I'll take you to see the sunset all over the world." Now he was grown up, and I was still right here. On Monday morning, I called my son. "Mom," he said, his voice tinged with surprise, probably because I rarely called him. "Kevin, I've been thinking, and I've decided to draw up a will." I paused deliberately. "Are you free this weekend? I'd like to have a family meeting to discuss it." There was a silence of a few seconds on the other end. "Why all of a sudden? Are you not feeling well?" "No, I just think it's time to get things in order," I said in a light tone. "You, Jessica, and Leo should all come." Okay, I'll arrange it." His voice suddenly became warm. "Mom, don't worry about a thing. You're in great health. You'll live to be 100. I hung up and let out a cold laugh. The power of money was truly amazing. It could turn a son, who was indifferent to his mother, into an attentive caregiver in an instant. Over the next few days, my phone was suddenly busy. Jessica called almost every day to check on me, even offering to take me shopping for new clothes. Kevin, for the first time in ages, sent good morning texts every day and said he wanted to buy me a new smartphone. On Friday evening, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Jessica and Leo standing there, their hands full of shopping bags. "Mom, we came to see you," she said, beaming. "Leo, say hi to Grandma." "Hi, Grandma," the boy mumbled reluctantly, his eyes fixed on the game console in his hands. I let them in. Jessica immediately got busy, arranging the takeout food she'd brought on plates and pulling a wool sweater out of a bag. "Mom, try this on. See if it fits." I played along, trying it on, and saying I liked it. She was as happy as a child. Then she took out various health supplements, chattering on about their benefits. Leo wandered around the house and finally stopped at the study. "Grandma, can I play games on this computer?" "No, it's very old," I said. "Ugh, what a piece of junk," he muttered, pursing his lips. "Dad said he's going to buy you a new one. You should throw this old thing out." Jessica awkwardly scolded her son. "How can you talk to your grandma like that?" Then she turned to me. "Mom, kids don't know what they're saying." "It's all right," I smiled. "Leo, come here. Grandma has something to show you." I led my grandson to the study and took the tin box out of the drawer. Leo leaned in curiously. "What's this?" "Your dad's treasures from when he was a little boy." I opened the box and took out the yellowed paper. "Look, this is something your dad wrote when he was 10. The boy frowned as he read it, a look of disdain on his face. "That's so lame. Turn into a little dog? That's hilarious." "Leo," Jessica snapped. She snatched the paper, glanced at it quickly, and her face changed. "Mom, he's just a kid. He doesn't understand." "I understand," Leo suddenly said loudly. "Mom said that when Grandma dies, the house will be ours, and then I can buy whatever I want." The room fell deathly silent. Jessica's face turned red, then white. Her lips trembled, but she couldn't say a word. I looked at her calmly, slowly took the paper back from her hand, and carefully placed it back in the box. "Is dinner ready?" I asked, as if nothing had happened. Dinner was eaten in an awkward silence. Leo wolfed down his food and ran off to watch TV. Jessica kept trying to make small talk, attempting to ease the tension. As she was leaving, she suddenly offered to help me clean up the house. "No, thank you. I like to do it myself," I declined. "Mom, you're getting older. Let us younger ones do these things," she insisted, her eyes scanning the room. "Where do you keep your important documents?" "The deed, bank statements. You need to keep them safe. They're in a safe deposit box at the bank." I lied without batting an eye. She was clearly disappointed. After a few more pleasantries, she left with her son. The moment the door closed, I sent a text to Catherine. "Tomorrow morning at 9. Bring the contracts to my house." The next morning, Catherine arrived as scheduled. We carefully reviewed the donation agreement and the property transfer deed. After confirming everything was in order, I signed my name. "Are you sure you don't want to leave a little something for yourself?" Catherine asked with concern. The assisted living facility's fees aren't cheap. I have $50,000 left in savings. That's enough for a long time, I said. Besides, my pension is over $400 a month. She shook her head. I still think you're being too impulsive. Catherine, do you know what my biggest regret in life is? I looked out the window. It was spoiling Kevin. After his father died, I poured all my love and energy into him, terrified he would suffer even a little. And what was the result? He turned into a selfish person, devoid of basic human decency. Catherine sighed and didn't try to persuade me further. In the afternoon, Chloe from the community center paid a surprise visit, saying it was a routine checkup. She brought a schedule of activities from the senior center and enthusiastically invited me to join. Mrs. Eleanor, you don't look so well, she noted with her sharp eyes. Have you been sleeping poorly? A little insomnia. It's nothing, I said with a forced smile. Has your son been to see you lately? He's coming tomorrow, I said. A family meeting. Chloe seemed to want to say something, but in the end, she just handed me a brochure. This is our new calligraphy class. Mr. Arthur teaches it. He's a member of the State Arts Council, you know. I glanced through it, about to decline, when I saw a photograph. An elderly man with white hair was writing, his profile resolute, his gaze focused. For some reason, I was drawn to the picture. How old is this Mr. Arthur? I asked. 65. A retired teacher, Chloe said, her eyes lighting up. He writes beautifully, and he's very witty. All the old ladies in the class adore him. I smiled. I might check it out when I have time. After Chloe left, I started preparing for the next day's family meeting. I printed out a few fake asset lists, deliberately writing one less zero on the savings amount and understating the property value. Then I placed these documents, along with a fake will I had prepared long ago, in a folder and locked it in my study drawer, leaving the key in a conspicuous place. That night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. Moonlight filtered through the curtains, casting a silver line on the floor. I got up, went to the study, opened my computer, and began to write a long letter. It wasn't a will or an indictment, but a reflection on my life. I started from the day Walter died, wrote about Kevin's upbringing, and how I had spoiled him step by step. At dawn, I rubbed my sore neck, saved the document, encrypted it, and hid the file. Then, I took a shower, changed into clean clothes, and prepared to face the carefully orchestrated family meeting. The doorbell rang at exactly 10 in the morning. I took a deep breath, composed my expression, and went to open the door. To my surprise, besides my son's family, there was an unexpected guest, Jessica's father. The same man who had just celebrated his birthday at a 5-star hotel. Dad insisted on coming along. Jessica explained in a low voice, an awkward smile on her face. Her father swaggered in, looked around, and clicked his tongue twice. Nice place. A bit old, though. I suppressed my annoyance and invited them to sit down. As soon as he entered, Leo started clamoring to play on the computer. I pointed to the study, and he immediately dashed in. Kevin looked a little uncomfortable, his gaze shifting, while Jessica was unusually enthusiastic, busying herself with pouring tea as soon as she sat down. So, I hear you're writing a will, Jessica's father said, getting straight to the point. If you ask me, it's about time. At your age, you could go at any moment, and then think of all the paperwork. Dad! Jessica shot him a look, then turned to me. Mom, don't mind him. My dad's just very direct. It's fine, I said calmly. Since everyone is here, I'll be direct too. I got up and went to the study to get the folder, deliberately leaving the drawer unlocked. When I returned, I saw Jessica's eyes following the folder in my hands, a greedy light shining in them. This is a list of my assets and a draft of my will, I said, placing the folder on the coffee table. You can take a look. 3 pairs of hands reached for the documents at the same time, like hungry beasts pouncing on their prey. They flipped through the pages eagerly. I watched them with a cold detachment, noticing Kevin's frown when he saw the savings amount, Jessica's disappointed expression at the property valuation, and her father's dismissive pout. Mom, you only have $12,000 in savings? Kevin couldn't help but ask. Yes, medical bills have been expensive these years, I said without changing my expression. And the house is only valued at $200,000? Jessica's voice rose. A similar unit across the street just sold for $300,000. That one was renovated. This old house isn't worth as much, I said flatly. Jessica's father suddenly interjected. There's a problem with this will. Why are you donating all the savings to some children's foundation? Leaving the house to Kevin is right, but you should add Jessica's and Leo's names. This is my will. I have the right to decide, I said calmly but firmly. The room fell silent. Leo ran out of the study, shouting, Grandma's computer is so lame it can't even install any games. Be quiet! Jessica snapped at her son, a rare occurrence. She then turned to me, forcing a smile. Mom, don't be hasty. We can discuss this further. There's nothing to discuss. I stood up. You've seen the documents. I'm going to the notary's office next week. Kevin suddenly grabbed my hand. Mom, are you mad at me? I know I've been busy lately and haven't had time to see you. Yes, Mom, Jessica chimed in. We were planning to ask you to move in with us. We've even been looking at houses, with a garden. You'd love it. I watched their clumsy performance with a cold smile in my heart. Just then, the doorbell rang. I went to open it. It was Chloe, the community worker, and behind her stood an elderly man with white hair. Mrs. Eleanor, sorry to bother you, Chloe said with a smile. Mr. Arthur heard you were interested in calligraphy and came to personally invite you to tomorrow's activity. The man from the photo, Mr. Arthur, extended his hand slightly. Ma'am, a pleasure to meet you. I'm Arthur. I was stunned for a moment, then recovered. Oh, please, come in. Although I have guests at the moment. Oh no, we won't stay. We just wanted to drop off the invitation, Chloe said, handing me an elegant card. Tomorrow morning at 9, at the community center. We hope to see you there. After they left, I returned to the living room to find the atmosphere had turned strange. Kevin and Jessica were exchanging glances, while her father looked disdainful. Mom, who was that? Kevin asked tentatively. Community workers and the calligraphy teacher, I answered briefly. Jessica suddenly laughed. Mom, don't tell me you have a new gentleman caller? That Mr. Arthur looked quite dapper. What nonsense are you talking? Her father snapped. She's in her 70s. It's embarrassing to be involved in things like that. I was shaking with anger, but I forced it down. Please leave. Mom, my dad didn't mean it like that, Jessica said, trying to smooth things over. Leave, I repeated, my voice ice cold. They reluctantly gathered their things. As he was leaving, Kevin turned back and said, Mom, the company's having some trouble. I need some money to get through it. How much? I asked directly. 50,000. No, 30,000 would be enough, he said, a glimmer of hope in his eyes. I don't have that much. You just said you have 12,000 in savings, he said eagerly. That's my retirement money. Mom, I'm your son. He suddenly raised his voice. If the company goes under, we won't even have money for Leo's private school. I looked at his distorted face and suddenly felt a wave of exhaustion. I'll give you an answer next week. They finally left. I closed the door and collapsed onto the sofa, feeling dizzy. My phone rang. It was a text from Catherine. All done. The deed has been transferred, and the donation has been wired. I replied, Thank you. Proceed as planned next week. Putting the phone down, I went out to the balcony and took a deep breath. The early summer breeze carried the scent of flowers. A few old men were playing chess in the shade of a tree below, and children were playing on the playground. It seemed like an ordinary day, but it was the beginning of a turning point in my life. The next day, I went to the community center as planned. The calligraphy class had already started. A dozen or so seniors were focused on their work. When Mr. Arthur saw me, he smiled and came over. Ma'am, welcome. I've prepared a brush and ink for you. I sat down, feeling a bit awkward, and picked up the brush. I hadn't written in years, and my hand was a little shaky. Mr. Arthur stood behind me and gently corrected my posture. Relax your wrist. Calm your heart. Strangely, under his guidance, I did slowly calm down. The scent of ink filled the air as the brush left black marks on the rice paper. I wrote a simple 5-character poem. Mr. Arthur looked at it and praised it repeatedly. Ma'am, you have a gift, he said to the other students. Look at the strength in these strokes, the solid structure. After the class, Mr. Arthur offered to walk me home. On the way, we chatted. It turned out he was also widowed and had a daughter living abroad who rarely came back. Children have their own lives, he said lightly, a flicker of sadness in his eyes. We old folks have to learn to find our own joy. His words resonated with me. When we reached my building, he suddenly said, "Ma'am, forgive me for asking, but is something on your mind?" I was taken aback. "Why do you ask?" "There's a sense of finality in your writing," he said thoughtfully, especially in the final 2 words, "farewell." The force of it went right through the paper. I managed a weak smile. "You're overthinking it, Mr. Arthur." He nodded and didn't press further, but he left me his phone number. "Call me any time if you need anything." Over the next few days, I was busy with paperwork. The property transfer, notarizing the donation agreement, making an appointment at the assisted living facility, everything proceeded in an orderly fashion. Catherine helped me find a remote but beautiful facility, and I prepaid for a year. On Friday evening, I received a call from Kevin. His voice was anxious. "Mom, have you thought about the money? The company really can't wait. Come to my house tomorrow morning. We'll talk," I said. After hanging up, I started packing, taking only necessary clothes and a few personal items, leaving everything else as it was. Finally, I put the long letter and a copy of my real will into an envelope, wrote "to my dear son" on it, and placed it in my desk drawer. The next morning, Arthur called unexpectedly, asking if I was coming to the calligraphy class. I declined, saying I had something to take care of at home. He seemed to hear something in my voice and paused before saying, "Ma'am, whatever you decide to do, please remember that there are people who care about you." His words made my eyes sting. I hastily thanked him and hung up. At 10 o'clock, Kevin arrived alone. He looked haggard, his suit wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot. "Mom, the money?" he asked eagerly as soon as he walked in. I gestured for him to sit down, then took out an envelope. "Here's 5,000. It's all I can give you." He took the envelope, felt its thinness, and his face immediately changed. "This is it? It's all I have. What about the house?" He suddenly raised his voice. "Mortgage the house. The bank will lend at least 200,000. "The house is not to be touched," I said calmly. "Why not?" He shot to his feet, his face contorted. "I'm your son. Everything you have is mine. What right do you have to refuse me?" Watching his hysterical outburst, I suddenly felt a sense of release. This was the son I had raised with all my heart and soul, a complete and utter egoist. "Kevin," I said softly, "do you remember a promise note you wrote when you were 10? He was stunned. "What promise note?" "You said that if you weren't a good son when you grew up, you would turn into a little dog," I said with a bitter smile. "It seems you'd rather be a dog." "What the hell did you just say?" he roared, grabbing a vase from the coffee table and smashing it on the floor. "You old hag. If my company goes under, I'll make sure you don't have a good life either." I watched his tantrum calmly. When he finally stopped, panting, I said slowly, "You can go now." "You just wait," he said viciously. "I'll get a lawyer and sue you. Your money, that house, it's all mine. The law says so." He slammed the door on his way out, the force of it shaking the picture frames on the wall. I sat amidst the wreckage and suddenly started to laugh. What he didn't know was that the house was no longer mine, and my savings were nearly gone. He would get nothing. In the afternoon, I called a taxi and quietly left with 2 suitcases. The assisted living facility was at the foot of a mountain on the outskirts of the city, a quiet and peaceful place far from the noise. My room was on the 2nd floor, with a window overlooking a small grove of trees. After settling in, I sent a text to Catherine. "Checked in. Proceed as planned." That night, lying in bed, I listened to the unfamiliar sound of the wind blowing through the unfamiliar trees. I suddenly remembered what Arthur had said. "Whatever you decide to do, please remember that there are people who care about you." In the darkness, I took out my phone, hesitated for a moment, and then dialed his number. The mornings at the assisted living facility came exceptionally early. At 5 o'clock, the birds in the woods outside my window would begin to sing, their crisp calls piercing through the thin curtains and waking me from a light sleep. I slowly sat up, rubbing my sore lower back. The bed here was firmer than the one at home, and after 3 days, I still wasn't used to it. After washing up, I made a cup of tea and sat on the small balcony to watch the sunrise. The mountain mist slowly rose, shrouding the distant treetops in a thin veil. Such a view should have been calming, but a dull ache in my chest had persisted for a week. I took out my phone and looked at the text Chloe had sent yesterday. "Mrs. Eleanor, your test results are in. A few indicators are abnormal. The doctor recommends a follow-up as soon as possible." Below it was the number for Dr. Evans at the community clinic. I hesitated for a moment, then dialed the number. Dr. Evans was very warm and said he had an opening at 10 this morning and could go over the report with me in detail. After hanging up, I checked the time. 3 hours to go. I took out the notebook I had brought with me and continued writing the long letter to my son. "Kevin, when you were 10, you had the chicken pox and a fever of 104 degrees. The doctor said if I had brought you in any later, it could have caused encephalitis. It was pouring rain that day, and no taxi would go to the suburbs. I carried you on my back for 2 miles. As I wrote this, my hand began to tremble. Not because the memory was painful, but because my right hand suddenly wouldn't cooperate. I tried to make a fist, but my fingers wouldn't close completely. This had been happening more frequently lately. At first, it was just occasional numbness, but now, sometimes my whole hand felt like it didn't belong to me. At 9:30, I called a taxi to the community clinic. Dr. Evans was a man in his early 40s, with gold-rimmed glasses and a gentle way of speaking, but his eyes were sharp. He carefully reviewed my test report, his brow furrowing deeper and deeper. "Mrs. Eleanor," he said, pushing his glasses up, "your white blood cell count is abnormally high, and your liver function indicators are not optimistic. I recommend you go to a major hospital for a more detailed examination." "What could it be specifically?" I asked directly. He hesitated. "It's hard to say. We need more tests to be sure. I've already contacted Professor Davis at City General Hospital for you. You can go directly to the internal medicine department to see him tomorrow at 9 in the morning." Leaving the clinic, I didn't go straight back to the facility. Instead, I went to a nearby park. It was late spring, and the flowers were in full bloom. A few elderly people were playing with their grandchildren, their laughter filling the air. I sat on a bench, watching them, and was suddenly reminded of when I used to bring Kevin here as a child. He was so small then, always calling Mommy, Mommy, now. My phone rang, interrupting my thoughts. It was an unknown number. "Hello, is this Mrs. Eleanor?" It was Arthur, the calligraphy teacher, his voice warm. "Chloe told me you went to the clinic today. Is everything all right?" I was a bit surprised that he would call. "It's nothing, just a routine checkup. You didn't come to class today. Everyone missed you." He paused. "I happened to be nearby. Would you like to have lunch together?" I was about to refuse, but my stomach growled at that exact moment. I realized I had only had a cup of tea that morning. "All right," I said. "I'm not familiar with this area. You pick the place." Half an hour later, we met at the park's west gate. Arthur was wearing a light gray shirt today, looking sharp and energetic. He took me to a quiet Cantonese restaurant and ordered a few light dishes. "You don't look well," he said bluntly after the food arrived. "The test results weren't ideal," I said, picking at a piece of steamed fish, slowly removing the bones. "The doctor recommended I go to the general hospital for a follow-up." He nodded and didn't ask any more questions. We talked about other things: calligraphy, poetry, amusing stories from the senior center. He was knowledgeable and witty. Before I knew it, I had finished a whole bowl of rice, the best appetite I'd had in days. After lunch, he insisted on taking me back to the facility. On the way, we passed a pharmacy. I suddenly remembered something and asked the driver to stop. "I need to buy some painkillers." "Please wait a moment," I said to Arthur. The pharmacist recommended several common painkillers, and I chose the most expensive one. As I was about to pay, a hand stopped me. Arthur picked up the box, carefully read the ingredients, and shook his head. "This one is very hard on the liver. You'd be better off trying this." He chose another herbal medicine. I was a bit surprised. "You know about medicine?" "Before I retired, I was a professor at the medical school," he smiled. "I taught anatomy." This unexpected revelation made me see him in a new light. On the way back to the facility, we talked about his career. It turned out he had taught at a top medical university for over 30 years, published hundreds of papers, and had even been a visiting scholar at Harvard. Then why teach calligraphy after retiring? I asked curiously. It's been a hobby since I was a child, he said. Medicine was my profession. Calligraphy is my passion. The car stopped at the entrance of the facility. He insisted on walking me to my room. As we passed the activity room, several residents greeted him warmly. He seemed to be very popular here. You're going to City General tomorrow? He asked at my door. I nodded. I can go with you. I know a few old colleagues there. I wanted to refuse, but a sudden wave of dizziness made me grab the doorframe for support. Arthur quickly steadied me by the arm. Are you all right? Just a little tired, I said with a weak smile. I'd appreciate your help tomorrow. The next morning, Arthur was waiting for me in the lobby. He was wearing a dark blue suit today, looking especially formal. City General was some distance from the facility. In the car, he told me he had already made the arrangements, so we wouldn't have to wait. You really don't have to do all this, I said, feeling indebted. It's no trouble at all, he said lightly. When we arrived at the hospital, we were indeed led directly to Professor Davis's office. A series of tests took up the entire morning. Professor Davis told us to come back at 3 in the afternoon for the results. Let's get some lunch, Arthur suggested. We had a simple meal at a small restaurant near the hospital. He tried to make light conversation, but my mind was elsewhere. The dull ache in my chest was becoming more pronounced. At exactly 3 o'clock, we returned to Professor Davis's office. He looked at the test results with a grave expression, then looked up at me. Ma'am, the situation is not optimistic. Just tell me straight, I said calmly. Late-stage liver cancer. It has already spread to the lungs. He pushed a CT scan across the desk, pointing to the shadows on it. Here and here. These are all tumors. I stared at the black and white images. They suddenly looked like a series of mocking, grimacing faces, taunting my very existence. How long do I have? I heard myself ask, my voice surprisingly steady. With aggressive treatment, maybe a year. Without treatment, 3 to 6 months. Professor Davis hesitated. Considering your age and physical condition, I would recommend palliative care, focusing on managing the pain. Arthur's hand rested gently on my shoulder, warm and firm. The car ride back to the facility was silent. The sun was setting, casting a golden glow on my hands through the car window. They were already covered in age spots, the skin loose like wrinkled paper. I suddenly realized that these hands would never be smooth and young again. Ma'am, Arthur started to say. Call me Eleanor, I said. Thank you for being with me today. Eleanor, he corrected himself. Is there anything I can do to help? I looked at the fleeting scenery outside the window. Keep this a secret, especially from Chloe. He nodded, then asked a question that surprised me. Does your son know? I don't have a son, I said calmly. He wisely didn't press the issue. By the time the car stopped at the facility, it was already dark. He insisted on walking me to my room and even went to the cafeteria to get me a container of hot porridge. Eat something, he said, placing it on the small table. I'll come see you tomorrow. After he left, I sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the porridge for a long time. The steam slowly dissipated, and a thin film formed on the surface, just like my life, slowly cooling and congealing. I took out my phone and called Catherine. Catherine, I don't have much time, I said directly. Late-stage liver cancer. 6 months at most. There was a silence of a few seconds on the other end. Should I inform Kevin? No, I said, my voice firm. Speed things up. I'm afraid I won't make it. The donation paperwork is complete. The elementary school is holding a groundbreaking ceremony next week. They've invited you to attend. I'll be there, I said. One more thing. Find me a reliable lawyer. I need to make sure Kevin can't undo these donations. After hanging up, I opened my laptop and continued writing the long letter. This time, I wrote quickly, as if racing against death itself. Halfway through, a sharp pain radiated from my chest to my back. I curled up in bed, cold sweat soaking my pajamas. I fumbled for the painkillers Arthur had recommended. Half an hour later, the pain slowly subsided. The next morning, the doorbell rang. I thought it was the meal service, but when I opened the door, it was Arthur, holding a thermal container. "Morning," he smiled. "I made a medicinal porridge. It's good for the liver." I let him in. He expertly set out a bowl and spoon and took out several bottles from his bag. "I prepared these herbal remedies last night. They have fewer side effects than Western medicine." "You don't have to do this," I said, at a loss for words. "Call me Arthur," he said, handing me a bowl of porridge. "Eat it while it's hot." The porridge was fragrant, with some herbs I didn't recognize, but it wasn't bitter. He sat on the small sofa, watching me eat every bite. "How are you feeling today?" he asked. "Much better," I told a small lie. He nodded, then took a stack of papers from his briefcase. "I looked up some literature. Although your illness is advanced, there are some alternative therapies that can alleviate the symptoms." I looked through the papers, which were covered in dense medical terminology interspersed with his handwritten notes. This man I had only known for a few days was going to such lengths for me. "Why are you helping me?" I couldn't help but ask. He thought for a moment. "My wife passed away 10 years ago. It was also cancer. At the time, there was no one to help her. I was away, teaching abroad." His voice caught. "Seeing you, it reminds me of her." I didn't know what to say, so I just lowered my head and continued to drink the porridge. He got up and adjusted the curtains, letting in more sunlight. For the next few days, Arthur came every day, sometimes with medicinal meals, sometimes just to walk with me. At his suggestion, I started to log the time and intensity of my pain, and he adjusted the medication accordingly. Gradually, I grew accustomed to his companionship. A week later, Principal Evans from the mountain school called to say the groundbreaking ceremony was scheduled for Wednesday morning and asked if I could attend. I agreed and asked Arthur to accompany me. On Wednesday morning, I put on my nicest clothes and even a touch of lipstick. When Arthur saw me, his eyes lit up. "You look very sharp." The journey took 2 hours. We arrived at Green Mountain Village. It was even more remote than I had imagined, with winding mountain roads and a dilapidated village. The elementary school was at the entrance to the village, a few rows of low-slung buildings with peeling paint and plastic sheeting over the windows that rattled in the wind. Principal Evans and a group of teachers and students were waiting at the gate to welcome us. When he saw me get out of the car, he rushed over excitedly. "Ma'am, you really came." The children, holding bouquets of wildflowers, looked at me shyly. Most of them were wearing ill-fitting, old clothes, some with holes in their shoes, but their eyes were bright with curiosity. The groundbreaking ceremony was simple. Principal Evans described the plans for the new school building and then invited me to say a few words. Standing on the makeshift stage, looking at the young faces below, I suddenly choked up. "I'm just an ordinary old woman," I said, trying to keep my voice from trembling, "but I know that education can change your destiny. I hope this new school will give you a better place to learn." I couldn't continue. A little girl came onto the stage, tied a red scarf around my neck, and gave me a shy hug. In that moment, I was suddenly reminded of Kevin's first day of elementary school, when I had tied his red scarf just like that. After the ceremony, Principal Evans gave us a tour of the school. The classrooms were dark and damp. The desks and chairs were old and broken, but the walls were covered with the children's colorful drawings and crafts. "It gets especially cold here in the winter," Principal Evans said, pointing to a rusty iron stove. "The children take turns bringing firewood from home to burn." My gaze fell on the pile of firewood in the corner, and a wave of sadness washed over me. Some of these children probably didn't even get enough to eat, yet they persisted in coming to school. Meanwhile, my grandson, who had everything, was so dismissive of his education. "When will the new school be finished?" I asked. "If all goes well, it will be ready in 3 months," Principal Evans said gratefully. "Thanks to your donation, the children will finally have decent classrooms." Before we left, the children lined up and each gave me a handmade thank you card. On the rough paper, they had written, "Thank you, Grandma Eleanor," in crooked handwriting, some even drawing hearts and little flowers. I carefully placed the cards in my bag, treating them like treasures. On the way back, I leaned against the car window, exhausted. Arthur thoughtfully turned up the heat. "Tired?" "It was worth it," I said softly. He seemed to want to say something, but in the end, he just gently patted my hand. Halfway through the drive, my phone rang. It was an unknown number. Hello? Mom? It was Kevin's voice, furious. Where are you? Why is no one home? My heart tightened. Is something wrong? Of course something's wrong, he practically shouted. I just checked with the county records office. You transferred the house to some stupid elementary school. Are you crazy? That's my house. I took a deep breath. It was my house. I had the right to do what I wanted with it. You just wait. I'm coming to find you right now, he said viciously and hung up. I held the phone, my fingers trembling slightly. Arthur looked over with concern. Need help? No, I said with a weak smile. Just drive. He nodded and didn't ask any more questions, but I noticed the car was going faster. It was late when we got back to the facility. He insisted on walking me to my room and even heated up a cup of milk for me. Call me if you need anything, he said before he left. I live in the teacher's building on the east side. It's very close. I thanked him, closed the door, and immediately called Catherine. She told me that Kevin had already been to see her, threatening to sue to have the donation revoked. Let him sue, I said with a cold laugh. All the documents are notarized. He can't win. Just as I hung up, the doorbell rang again. I thought Arthur had forgotten something, but when I opened the door, it was Kevin, his suit disheveled, his eyes bloodshot. Mom? He pushed the door open and stormed in. What the hell are you trying to do? I backed away, the dull ache in my chest starting up again. I've made myself very clear. Clear about what? He roared, spittle flying from his mouth. Giving away hundreds of thousands of dollars to strangers while your own son is having a financial crisis. Do you know my company is about to go bankrupt? Do you know Leo might have to change schools? I looked at him calmly, at his hysterical face, and he suddenly seemed like a complete stranger. This was the son I had raised with such hardship, a man who cared only about money. Kevin, I said, walking to my desk and taking out the notebook that documented his various cruelties. Look at this. He took it suspiciously, flipped through a few pages, and his face grew darker and darker. You've been writing all this down? Since you started college, I said calmly. Every time you disappointed me, I wrote it down. At first, it was to remind myself not to be too demanding. Later, I gave a bitter smile. Later, it was just to prove to myself that I wasn't being too sensitive. He flipped through the pages rapidly, then slammed the book shut. So this is revenge? Just because I forgot your birthday a few times? No, Kevin, I said, sinking wearily into my chair. This isn't revenge. It's liberation. I'm tired. I can't love you anymore. Don't give me that crap. He threw the notebook on the floor. I don't care what your reasons are. You're going to reverse those donations right now. Or else what? I looked up at him. Sue me? I'm dying, Kevin. Late-stage liver cancer. I have 6 months. Tops. Do you think a court is going to care about a dead woman's property dispute? He froze, the anger on his face hardening into a comical expression. You're lying. The diagnosis is in the drawer. See for yourself. He mechanically pulled open the drawer, found the report, and stared at it for a long time. When he looked up again, there was no sadness in his eyes, only calculation. Mom, if that's the case, you should be leaving your property to me. I can take care of you. That won't be necessary. I cut him off. The facility is very nice. I have people to take care of me. The money, it's been donated. Not a penny left, I said calmly. Except for what I've prepaid for my funeral, I've left nothing. His face twisted. You'd rather give it to those poor people than to your own son and grandson? Those poor people know more about gratitude than you do. I pointed to the thank you cards peeking out of my bag. They call me Grandma Eleanor. And you, how long has it been since you've called me Mom? We were at a stalemate, the air thick with hatred. Finally, he let out a cold laugh. Fine. That's fine. Since you don't consider me your son, I don't have a mother. When you die, don't expect me to come and collect your body. He slammed the door, the force of it shaking the picture frame on the wall. I slowly sank to the floor, the pain in my chest so intense I could barely breathe. I fumbled for a painkiller and curled up on the bed, waiting for it to take effect. I don't know how much time passed before the doorbell rang again. I thought it was Kevin. Come back. I managed to drag myself up and open the door, only to see Arthur standing there, holding a food container. I figured you didn't have dinner. His words trailed off. Eleanor, what happened? Only then did I realize my pajamas were soaked with cold sweat and my face must have looked terrible. He helped me to a chair without a word and took a stethoscope out of his medical bag. Don't bother, I said weakly. It's an old problem. He insisted on listening to my heart and lungs, took my blood pressure, and then poured me a glass of warm water. Take your medicine. I obediently swallowed the pills he handed me. Soon, the pain began to ease. He heated up the porridge and fed it to me, spoonful by spoonful, like a father caring for a child. Your son was here? He asked softly. I nodded, not wanting to talk about it. He didn't press, just quietly cleared the dishes and sat by my bed with me. Arthur, I said suddenly, could you do me a favor? Anything. Find me a publisher. I want to publish a book. He was a little surprised. What kind of book? My memoir. I pointed to my laptop. I'm halfway through. I need to finish the rest quickly. He nodded gravely. I have a former student who works in publishing. I'll contact him tomorrow. He stayed very late that night. Before he left, he hesitated, then leaned down and gave me a gentle hug. Get some rest. I'll see you tomorrow. The hug was warm and restrained, but it made my eyes well up. How long had it been since someone had held me like that? After Walter died, I had never felt such warmth again. The morning sunlight streamed through the crack in the curtains, casting a golden line on the floor. I stared at the line of light for a long time, remembering my mother used to say that sunlight has a shape, we just usually can't see it. The doorbell rang. I slowly got up to open it. It was Arthur, holding a thermal container, a gentle smile on his face. Morning, he said. I made some yam porridge. It's good for the stomach. I let him in. He expertly set out a bowl and spoon and took a small bottle out of his bag. This is reishi mushroom spore powder. It has some anti-cancer properties. And I drank the porridge in small sips while he opened my laptop to check the draft I had written last night. This is very good, he said earnestly. Simple, but powerful. I contacted my student. He's very interested and wants to schedule a meeting next week to discuss it. I nodded and continued with my porridge. My appetite had been getting worse these days, but the medicinal meals Arthur brought always helped me eat a little more. How are you feeling today? He asked. All right, I said, putting down the bowl. My right hand is just a little numb. He immediately took out his blood pressure cuff, measured my pressure, and checked my pupils. It's probably a side effect of the medication. I'll adjust the formula. Just as he was speaking, the doorbell rang again. Arthur went to open it, and I heard Chloe's cheerful voice. Mr. Arthur. Chloe, Arthur said, a bit surprised. What brings you here? I came to see Mrs. Eleanor. I heard her son was here yesterday. I quickly spoke up. Chloe, come on in. Chloe entered and saw us having breakfast, her eyes wide. Mrs. Eleanor, you and Mr. Arthur. Mr. Arthur is my calligraphy teacher, I said calmly, and also a doctor. He's helping me with my health. Chloe nodded, looking skeptical, then took a folder out of her bag. The community center is updating its senior files. I need you to fill out a few forms. She sat down and began to explain the forms, and I filled them out mechanically. When I got to the emergency contact section, I hesitated. Should I put your son's name here? Chloe asked. No, I said calmly. Put Mr. Arthur's name. Chloe and Arthur both looked up at me at the same time. I pretended not to notice their surprise and continued filling out the other information. After finishing the forms, Chloe hesitated. Mrs. Eleanor, your son came to the community center yesterday looking for you. He seemed very angry. He was looking in the wrong place, I said flatly. Chloe tactfully didn't press the issue, packed up the forms, and prepared to leave. Arthur walked her to the door, and they spoke in low voices for a few moments. What did she ask you? I asked when Arthur came back. Just about your health, he said dismissively. I told her you were doing fine. I smiled, not bothering to call his bluff. Chloe was a smart girl. She must have figured something out. Over the next few days, I devoted all my energy to writing my memoir. Arthur came to see me every day, bringing food and medicine, and sometimes helping me edit the manuscript. At his suggestion, I added some medical details to make the story more compelling. On Thursday afternoon, Catherine paid a surprise visit, her face grave. "Kevin filed a lawsuit," she said directly. "He's asking the court to declare you mentally incompetent and revoke the donations." I let out a cold laugh. "What evidence does he have?" "He found 2 doctors to issue a psychiatric evaluation report," Catherine said with concern. "They're from small clinics, but don't worry." Arthur suddenly interjected. "I'm a retired professor from the medical school, and I'm registered with the Judicial Appraisal Center. I can perform a mental evaluation for Eleanor." Catherine's eyes lit up. "That's wonderful. Professor Arthur's reputation will be more than enough to counteract the testimony of those 2 doctors." They discussed the legal details while I walked to the window and looked out at the woods. Sunlight filtered through the leaves, casting dappled shadows on the ground. When the wind blew, the patches of light shimmered like ripples on water. Life is so fragile, just like these fleeting shadows. "Eleanor?" Catherine called to me. "The hearing is next Monday. Can you be there?" "Yes," I said, turning around. "I want to see just how far my son is willing to go." After Catherine left, Arthur stayed to help me prepare for the lawsuit. We gathered all my medical records, financial documents, and the notebook detailing Kevin's cruelties. "Do we have to submit all of this to the court?" he asked hesitantly. "Everything," I said firmly. "Let everyone see how a mother was pushed to this point by her own son." Oh. That evening, Arthur contacted the editor from the publishing house. The editor was very interested after hearing about the manuscript and scheduled a meeting to sign the contract next week. "This could be a bestseller," Arthur said after hanging up. "All the royalties will be donated to the mountain school," I said without hesitation. He looked at me, his expression complex. "You're really not leaving anything for yourself?" "I need very little now," I said, pointing to my medicine box. "A few painkillers are enough." He was silent for a moment, then suddenly said, "Eleanor, I want to help you fulfill one last wish." "What wish?" "Anything you've wanted to do but haven't," he said earnestly. "Travel? See someone?" I thought for a moment. "I want to take a nice photograph." He was taken aback, then smiled. "That's easy. I know a good photographer. I'll arrange it for tomorrow." The next day, Arthur brought a young female photographer. She carefully applied light makeup for me, styled my hair, and brought several elegant silk dresses for me to choose from. While she was taking the photos, Arthur stood behind her, constantly making me laugh. "Excellent," the photographer said, looking at the prints. "Mrs. Eleanor, you have a beautiful smile." I looked at the photos. They were indeed good. The wrinkles on my face were still there, but my eyes were bright, and the curve of my lips was natural and soft. It was the first picture of me genuinely smiling in years. "Thank you both," I said sincerely. The weekend was peaceful and fulfilling. Arthur walked with me in the facility's garden, helped me revise my manuscript, and sometimes we just sat quietly, each reading our own book. His companionship reminded me of the days when Walter was still alive, peaceful, and warm. On Monday morning, Arthur came to pick me up, wearing a formal dark suit. The courthouse was downtown, about a half-hour drive. Catherine was already waiting at the entrance and rushed over when she saw us. "There's a change of plans," she said in a low voice. Kevin hired a high-profile lawyer and brought the media. I followed her gaze and saw several people who looked like reporters, holding cameras and microphones. "Don't worry," Arthur said, squeezing my hand. "I'm here." The courtroom was small but solemn. Kevin and Jessica sat at the plaintiff's table. When I entered, Kevin's gaze flickered for a moment before hardening again. Jessica just stared at me, the hatred in her eyes almost tangible. The judge was a middle-aged woman with a stern face. She banged her gavel and declared the court in session. Kevin's lawyer spoke first, claiming I was old and confused and had been manipulated into making unreasonable financial decisions that harmed the rights of my legal heir. He presented 2 psychiatric evaluation reports, stating that I suffered from mild senile dementia. When it was our turn, Catherine first refuted the other side's claims, emphasizing that I was of sound mind and that my financial decisions were legal and valid. Then, She called Arthur to the stand as an expert witness. Arthur walked calmly to the witness stand, presented his credentials and the mental evaluation report he had prepared for me. "Mrs. Eleanor's mental state is completely normal," he said firmly. "Her cognitive functions are superior to those of her peers, and there are no signs of dementia." The opposing lawyer tried to question his conclusions, but Arthur refuted each point with a litany of professional terms. In the end, the judge had to cut off the other lawyer's badgering and accept Arthur's testimony. Next, Catherine requested to play a video. On the screen, the children of Green Mountain Elementary, holding flowers, said in unison, "Thank you, Grandma Eleanor." Then, Principal Evans spoke, describing how the new school building had improved the children's learning environment. After the video, Catherine stood up. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Eleanor, donated her life savings to a poor mountain school out of a sense of charity. The plaintiff, Mr. Kevin, who has a 6-figure salary, is trying to take away his mother's retirement funds. It is clear who is right and who is wrong." A murmur went through the courtroom. Kevin shot to his feet. "That's my money. He had no right to just give it away." The judge banged her gavel. "The plaintiff will control himself." Just then, the back door of the courtroom was pushed open, and a small figure ran in. It was Leo. He was wearing his school uniform, panting, and ran straight to me. "Grandma!" Everyone was stunned. Leo took a piggy bank out of his backpack and stuffed it into my hands. This is for your treatment. I've been saving for a long time." I took the heavy piggy bank with trembling hands, tears streaming down my face uncontrollably. Leo turned to face the judge, his voice young but firm. "Your Honor, please don't let my dad take my grandma's money. Grandma's sick. She needs the money for treatment." The courtroom was silent. I saw Kevin's face turn deathly pale, while Jessica grabbed her son and hissed something at him. The judge thought for a moment, then banged her gavel. "Given the sufficient evidence, this court rules that Mrs. Eleanor is of sound mind and her disposition of property is legal and valid. The plaintiff's request is denied. Court is adjourned." Kevin rushed toward me, trying to say something, but was blocked by the bailiffs. The reporters swarmed us, their cameras and microphones pointed at us. Arthur and Catherine shielded me and quickly led me out of the courtroom. Chloe managed to get Leo out in time as well. Back at the facility, I collapsed onto the bed, exhausted. Arthur poured me a cup of hot tea and sat by my side. "How did Leo get there?" I asked. "Chloe told him," Arthur said. "That kid is very smart. He overheard his parents talking about faking your mental evaluation and ran away from school." I caressed the piggy bank, a mix of emotions swirling inside me. A picture of Leo was taped to it, smiling sweetly. I opened it. It was full of coins, and there was a note inside. "For Grandma's treatment. I misjudged that child," I said softly. "He's better than his parents." Arthur nodded. "The child is good at heart. He was just led astray by his parents." That evening, Chloe brought Leo to see me. The boy ran to me as soon as he entered and threw his arms around me. "Grandma, does it hurt?" "It doesn't hurt. Now that I see you, it doesn't hurt at all," I said, stroking his hair. "Thank you for today." Leo looked up, his eyes red. "Grandma, Dad, and Mom, they said they were going to send you to a mental hospital. I overheard them." My heart lurched. "Don't be afraid," Arthur reassured him. "With Grandpa Arthur and Aunt Chloe here, they can't do that." Chloe confirmed Leo's story. It turned out that Kevin and Jessica had indeed planned to forcibly commit me to a mental hospital after I lost the case, and then, as my legal guardians, revoke the donations. "That's just evil," Arthur said, clenching his fists. "What will happen to Leo now?" I asked with concern. "I've applied for temporary guardianship," Chloe said. "As a community worker, I'm qualified to intervene when parents are unfit to raise their child." End of. Leo fell asleep in my arms, his face still streaked with tears. I gently patted his back, just as I had done with Kevin so many years ago. "I want to change my will," I said suddenly. Arthur and Catherine exchanged a look. "What do you want to add?" "Set up a trust fund," I said, looking at the sleeping Leo. "When he turns 18, he can use this money for college." Catherine nodded. "A wise decision." That night, Leo slept on the sofa in my room. Watching his peaceful, sleeping face, I suddenly felt that perhaps my life still had some meaning. At least I could help this child walk a better path. 3 days after the trial ended, my condition suddenly worsened. In the middle of the night, a sharp pain woke me from my sleep. Cold sweat instantly soaked my pajamas. I fumbled for my painkillers but found that my right hand was completely unresponsive. I managed to dial Arthur's number with my left hand, but after saying just one word, "Help," I lost consciousness. When I woke up again, I was in the hospital. A white ceiling, the smell of disinfectant, and an IV needle in my arm. Arthur was sitting by my bed, his eyes bloodshot, clearly having been up all night. "You're awake," he said, leaning in immediately. "How do you feel?" "Pain," I said weakly. He adjusted the IV drip, adding a painkiller. "It'll be better in a moment." Only then did I notice there were other people in the room. Chloe and Leo were sitting in a corner. Leo's eyes were red, as if he had been crying. "Grandma?" he cried, running over as soon as he saw me awake. "Please don't die." I managed a weak smile. "Grandma's fine." Chloe came over and stroked Leo's head. "Mrs. Eleanor, the doctor says you need to be hospitalized for a few days for observation. Leo will stay with me. Don't worry." I nodded gratefully. Arthur told me I had been unconscious for over 10 hours. My liver function was severely compromised and I needed systematic treatment. "How much longer?" I asked softly. He was silent for a moment. "A few weeks, maybe a month." Surprisingly, I felt no fear, only a sense of relief. The suffering was finally coming to an end. All the grudges and resentments would dissipate with my passing. "I want to see Kevin," I said suddenly. Arthur frowned. "Are you sure?" "One last time." He sighed and went out to make a call. Chloe took Leo to the cafeteria, leaving me alone with the beeping machines. Half an hour later, Arthur returned, his expression grim. He refuses to come. He said he doesn't have time to play along with his drama queen mother. I closed my eyes as a single tear rolled down my cheek. Was this how it was going to end? Dying alone in a hospital, with my only son unwilling to even see me one last time. "Eleanor," Arthur said, taking my hand. "I'm here." I opened my eyes and saw his resolute gaze. Suddenly, I didn't feel so alone. In the afternoon, the doctor came to do his rounds. He said my condition was stable for now but could deteriorate at any moment. Arthur stayed by my side, not leaving even for meals, which Chloe brought in a container. As evening fell, the door to my room was pushed open. I thought it was Leo, but when I looked up, I saw a stranger in a suit. "Mrs. Eleanor?" he asked politely. "I'm David Chen, the general manager of Kevin's company." I was stunned. "What is it?" "I'm here on behalf of the company to see how you are," he said, putting down a fruit basket. "I also need to inform you that the company's board of directors has decided to terminate Kevin's employment." Arthur stood up. "Mr. Chen, the patient needs to rest." "I understand, Mr. Chen," Chen said with a nod. "But this is very important. Kevin embezzled company funds and forged contracts. He is under investigation for criminal activity. More seriously, his unfilial behavior towards his mother was exposed by the media, which has severely damaged the company's reputation." "The media?" I looked at Arthur in surprise. He coughed. "There were reporters outside the courthouse that day. I may have contacted one or two I knew." "Mr. Chen continued, "The board unanimously agreed that a man who can abandon his own mother is not to be trusted. We have already reported him to the police. Kevin should be under investigation as we speak." I didn't know what to say. On the one hand, I was ashamed of Kevin's actions. On the other, I felt a sad pity for his fate. "Thank you for letting me know," was all I could say. After Mr. Chen left, Arthur seemed a bit uneasy. Did I go too far? I shook my head. He brought this on himself. That evening, Chloe brought Leo. The boy ran to my bedside and gently touched my hand. "Grandma, does it hurt?" "No." I managed to smile. "How was school today?" He chattered on about school, saying Chloe had bought him a new backpack and taken him for a burger. Looking at his smiling face, I suddenly felt that perhaps my passing wouldn't be all regret. At least this child might now have a chance to walk a different path. Over the next few days, my condition fluctuated. Arthur practically lived at the hospital, his clean clothes brought by Chloe. The editor from the publishing house came to the hospital to sign the contract, promising to publish my memoir as soon as possible. A week later, it was a beautiful morning. The sun shone warmly into the room. I felt surprisingly energetic and was even able to sit up and drink some porridge. Arthur helped me comb my hair and read me some amusing articles from the newspaper. "The weather is so nice today," I said, looking out the window. "I'd like to go for a walk." He hesitated. "I'll ask the doctor." The doctor reluctantly agreed to let me go to the garden in a wheelchair for half an hour. Arthur carefully wrapped me in a blanket, while Chloe followed with the IV drip. The hospital's small garden was in full bloom, the air filled with the scent of flowers. Leo ran around excitedly, picked a small wildflower, and tucked it into my collar. "Grandma, it's pretty." "It's beautiful," I said, stroking his face. "Leo, Grandma has something for you." I took a key out of my pocket. "This is the key to Grandma's house. There's a tin box in the study drawer. It has things your dad wrote when he was a little boy. You can look at them when you're older." He took the key solemnly, as if accepting a sacred mission. "I'll keep it safe." After returning to my room, I began to feel tired. Arthur helped me lie down and adjusted the IV drip. Chloe took Leo home, saying they would be back tomorrow. "Arthur," I said softly after they left, "could you do me a favor? Anything. After I'm gone, please look after Leo. Don't let him become like his father." He squeezed my hand tightly. "I promise. And my funeral. Keep it simple. Scatter my ashes on the hill behind the Green Mountain Elementary School. I want to watch those children grow up." His eyes reddened. "I'll do as you say." Night fell. The only sound in the room was the beeping of the monitor. Arthur sat by my bed, holding my hand, and softly told me stories of his travels abroad when he was young. I gradually grew sleepy, my eyelids getting heavier and heavier. "Go to sleep," he said gently. "I'm here." I closed my eyes and drifted into darkness. In a daze, I dreamed I was young again. Kevin was just a toddler, laughing and running into my arms. The sun was so warm, the breeze so gentle. Everything was full of hope. Consciousness ebbed and flowed like the tide. Sometimes I could hear the sounds around me, feel the warmth of a hand holding mine. Other times, I was plunged into a boundless darkness where even time ceased to exist. When I became lucid again, the sunlight outside told me it was the next morning. Arthur was still sitting by my bed, but with 2 dark circles under his eyes, clearly from another sleepless night. Chloe and Leo stood at the foot of the bed. Leo's eyes were red, as if he had cried. "Grandma!" Leo cried, rushing over when he saw my eyes open. "You slept for so long." I smiled weakly, trying to lift my hand to touch his head, but my arm felt as heavy as lead. Arthur immediately adjusted the bed, allowing me to sit up slightly. "How do you feel?" he asked softly. "Thirsty." My voice was so hoarse it was barely audible. He helped me wet my lips and dabbed my dry, cracked mouth with a wet cotton swab. His gentle care reminded me of how I had cared for my own mother in her final days. The circle of life. How strange. "Leo," I managed to say, "Grandma has something for you." Chloe took an envelope out of her bag and handed it to me. I gestured for her to give it to Leo. "Don't open it until you're 18. Leo took the envelope solemnly, holding it tightly to his chest. "I'll keep it safe." And I looked at Arthur. He understood immediately. "The memoir has been typeset. It will be on sale next week. The publisher has decided to title it, The End of Love. What do you think?" I nodded slightly. The title was fitting. My love had indeed reached its end, but perhaps it would begin again somewhere else. "Mrs. Eleanor." Chloe hesitated. "Kevin wants to see you." I froze, looking at Arthur. He nodded. "He was released on bail last night. He's been waiting downstairs. The police found that most of the embezzled funds were spent by Jessica, so the charges against him were reduced." I closed my eyes. A wave of pain washed over my chest, not physical pain, but the familiar ache of being hurt by someone you love. "Let him come in," I finally said. A few minutes later, the door was gently pushed open. Kevin stood in the doorway, his suit wrinkled, his hair a mess, his eyes bloodshot. He looked 10 years older. "Mom," his voice trembled. I didn't respond, just watched him quietly. The son I had once loved with all my being now stood before me like a stranger. He slowly walked to my bedside and suddenly dropped to his knees. "Mom, I'm sorry." A tear fell to the floor, then another, and another. His shoulders shook violently, like a child who had done something wrong. "I was wrong. I was so wrong," he choked out, his voice thick with sobs. "I was blinded by money. I let Jessica lead me around by the nose. I forgot everything you did for me." I remained silent. Years of hurt could not be erased with a few words of apology, but watching him weep, the ice around my heart cracked just a little. "Leo needs a father," was all I said in the end. He looked up, his face streaked with tears. "Mom, can you forgive me?" I didn't answer his question. Instead, I looked at Leo. "Show your father the promise note." "Oh." Leo took the key out of his pocket. "Dad," Grandma said there's a tin box in the study drawer. Kevin took the key with a trembling hand, then suddenly covered his face and began to cry even louder. He remembered. The tin box, the yellowed paper, the innocent and solemn promise of a 10-year-old boy. He reached for my hand, but I gently pulled away. "It's too late, Kevin," I said softly. "My love has run out." His expression froze, as if he had been struck by lightning. Perhaps he thought a few words of apology could fix everything, just like when he was a child and a little whining could earn him forgiveness. But this time was different. His mother's love had finally run dry. "No, Mom," he said, shaking his head. "Give me a chance, I beg you." I closed my eyes wearily. Arthur immediately stepped forward. "The patient needs to rest. Please leave for now." Kevin wanted to say more, but Chloe was already leading Leo out. He had no choice but to follow. After the door closed, I let out a long sigh, as if a great weight had been lifted from my shoulders. "Do you regret seeing him?" Arthur asked softly. I shook my head. "He needs to face his choices." In the afternoon, the doctor came to do his rounds. His expression was grave. He asked to speak with me alone, but the medical jargon was meaningless to me now. I knew my time was short. "Arthur," I said after the doctor left, "help me record a video." He took out his phone and adjusted the angle. I smoothed my hair and smiled calmly at the camera. "Kevin, Leo," I began slowly. "When you see this video, I'll be gone." I talked for a long time about memories, regrets, and hopes. Finally, I said to Leo, "Grandma loves you. I hope you grow up to be a kind person." And to Kevin, "As for your father, forgive him. He's not a bad person at heart, just lost." After recording the video, I was exhausted. Arthur helped me save the file and set it to send automatically after my passing. As night fell again, Arthur insisted on staying with me. I couldn't argue, so I let him. In the middle of the night, I was suddenly seized by a sharp pain, and breathing became difficult. The monitor let out a piercing alarm. Doctors and nurses rushed in, beginning emergency procedures. As the pain peaked, strangely, I felt a sense of release. Scenes from my life flashed before my eyes. Walter's gentle smile, Kevin learning to walk, the grateful eyes of the mountain children, Leo's innocent laugh, and finally, Arthur's tired but resolute face. "Arthur," I said, gripping his hand with the last of my strength. "Thank you." Then darkness washed over me like a tide, swallowing everything. 1 year later, on a hill behind Green Mountain Elementary School, a simple tombstone stood quietly. On it was a single line, Eleanor, 1949, 2023. A mother. It was spring, and a group of people came to visit the grave. At the front was Arthur. He looked a bit older than a year ago, with more white hair, but he was still full of spirit. Beside him was Leo. The boy had grown taller and was holding a bouquet of wildflowers. "Grandpa Arthur, can Grandma really see us?" Leo asked softly. "Of course she can," Arthur said, stroking his head. "She's watching you from heaven." Leo carefully placed the flowers in front of the tombstone, then took a stack of letters out of his backpack. "Grandma, these are letters from my classmates. The new school is beautiful, and we all love the books in the library." Arthur stood to the side, watching the boy earnestly read each letter to his grandmother, his eyes welling up. So much had changed in a year. Kevin and Jessica had divorced. Jessica took her share of the assets and moved abroad. Kevin, after losing his job, fell into a downward spiral of drinking. It was Leo's weekly visits that slowly helped him get back on his feet. The End of Love became a sensation after it was published, topping the bestseller list for 3 months. All the royalties, according to Eleanor's wishes, were donated to rural education, enough to keep Green Mountain Elementary running for 10 years. The media clamored to report the story, sparking a nationwide discussion on the rights of the elderly and the nature of family. "Grandpa Arthur?" Leo asked suddenly. "Did Grandma forgive Dad in the end?" Arthur thought for a moment. "I think so. But more than that, she wanted to see your father truly change." Leo nodded. He took out the envelope Eleanor had left for him. He had already opened it. Inside was a check and a letter, instructing him to use the money for college and to always remember to be a kind person. "Dad said he's coming to see Grandma next week," Leo said. "He got a new job as a supervisor at a construction site." "That's good," Arthur smiled. After paying their respects, they slowly walked down the hill. The sound of children reading aloud drifted from Green Mountain Elementary. The brand-new school building glistened in the sunday. At the school gate stood a stone tablet engraved with the words, "Donated by Mrs. Eleanor." Leo ran into the schoolyard to play with his classmates. Arthur stood before the stone tablet, gently tracing the 3 words. The wind blew, carrying the scent of flowers, like a gentle sigh. "Eleanor," he said softly, "do you see? Your love has no end."